All good.
Hello, welcome everybody. Thank you for joining us tonight. New Hampshire for Safe Technology and Cece Doucette, our wonderful guest. And we're so glad you joined us here. My name is Deb Hogdon, and I'm one of the co-founders of New Hampshire for Safe Technology, along with Jen White that you see here. And hopefully I'll be a little better than the last meeting. If any of you were on there, I was having great trouble thinking and speaking because I am also affected by wireless. I was having a lot of trouble putting my words together, thinking. I've had 5 years ago, I discovered it was because of wireless. I'd had pulmonary embolisms, foggy head. I was getting lost in the town I lived in. I was having trouble sleeping, tinnitus, toothache, severe head pressure, all kinds of things. And then I discovered about wireless. And through that, I went to see Generations Apt and met Cece, who has held my hand or pushed me along and encouraged me through the years, along with meeting Jen, and we all worked together for New Hampshire House Bill 522, which established the commission in 2019. And we still are here today. And our goal today is to help inform everybody so that they can make decisions to feel empowered in how they can use technology safely. And with that, I will
Well,
introduce.
wait, Deb.
What?
Tell them why you were so brain fogged the last time.
Oh, right. See, I already forgot. So the day before we had been at the State House and I assumed it was from that, but I was wrong because I had discovered that a Windows update had happened on my computer a few days before, and I didn't know that. It had happened only one other time in the 5 years I've had my computer hardwired, and it turned my Bluetooth back on. So I had been sitting here in front of my desk for a couple of days, working for hours and in the Zoom call, and I couldn't think, I couldn't talk, I couldn't function. And interestingly enough, it just happened again 2 days ago. And instead of turning my Bluetooth on, it totally deleted my Bluetooth button. So now I can't even access it. So maybe that's a good thing.
And you measured and it's not radiating?
It's not, and I just measured now, but the same thing happened in my husband's car. So now I can't get in his car. All the things that have been fine now suddenly keep turning themselves on. And so I think Jen probably has that to share too, but I will turn this over to Jen, and maybe she can say a few words about a great event that New Hampshire for Safe Technology and Cece were at yesterday. And unfortunately, I was not able to attend.
Thank you, Deb.
You're welcome.
Thanks, Deb. Hi, everyone. This is Jen White. I am the co-founder of New Hampshire for Safe Technology, along with Deb. Lori Schreier is also a major part of our team here, and she's couldn't attend this evening, but she's here in spirit. So forgive me, I'm a little foggy too. We attended this amazing Holistic Health Expo yesterday, and we were able to do an amazing outreach of education to folks on the dangers of wireless. And we were just so grateful to be part of it. Sonia Godet, she was the organizer, and she so graciously invited us to attend. And we had a booth set up for New Hampshire for Safe Technology, along with Cece and Massachusetts for Safe Technology. And we just felt honored to be able to connect with people and talk to them heart to heart about the dangers of wireless technology and sort of, what alternatives are out there to, use technology a little bit more safely. So I'm also electromagnetic sensitive, unfortunately. And so it was just really amazing to connect with folks on sort of a deeper level about this subject, and just share my story, and just let people know that, things that we're going through, we don't want others to be harmed by wireless, and that's precisely why we're doing what we're doing. So we're all very, very passionate about this subject, and we're here to help. And that's really what our intentions are. And we thank you so much for being here. And please, continue to join us. We always have new information coming. We do 2 sessions per month, and Cece is amazing to be partnering with us and helping us on this level. So thank you, Cece, and I'm going to pass it over to you.
Okay, thank you
Well-
so much. I am honored to stand shoulder to shoulder with you guys on this too, because when I started my journey, it was a very lonely place to be. I had no idea there was anything wrong with wireless or even to question until I was at book group one night and a girlfriend of mine tipped me off that there could be biological effects from today's wireless technology. And I'm going to go ahead and do a screen share and walk you through some of the information that we have today that allows us to easily learn the facts, figure out what the risks are, and then make choices around safe technology solutions. So I'm going to go ahead and put my slides. Can somebody give me a nod if you can see this? Okay, great. Thanks, Jen. So that MTPW after my name just means I had the privilege of earning a master's in technical and professional writing from Northeastern. And never in a million years did I imagine this is what I would be using my skill set for. But I'm so grateful because I write all day, every day, letters of support, reaching out to towns and to schools and to, whoever needs to have a hand held to learn about this issue. So I'm very grateful for my background. And when we first discovered that this could be harmful, it was a really hard conversation to have with our schools because the industry had already penetrated at the state level and convinced our departments of education that all Wi-Fi all the time is the way to go. And the kids are going to need to have all this new technology to succeed in our world. But ultimately, when we took a look at this, we became the first public school district in the nation to have this little sign over here with best practices for mobile devices. And it just says, turn off these devices when we're not using them, turn the Wi-Fi on only when it's needed, and always place the mobile device on a solid surface. And we'll give you the reason for that in just a minute. So this was back in 2014. Then I went to my state legislators and taught them what I was learning. And in 2015, we introduced a bill here in Massachusetts to just simply bring the right minds to the table together, look at the facts on this issue, and then let's decide what to do. Now, I don't know what's happening in Massachusetts because we've been at this for 8 years on my bill. And others that have come along the way, and we have made progress, but we've never passed a law. New Hampshire, however, has, and we're going to walk you through that in just a few minutes too. So on this journey, I've had the privilege of meeting many of the world's leading doctors and scientists, other advocates, public health experts, and unfortunately, far too many people who have become harmed by today's wireless technology. So I was invited to volunteer with a group over in Europe that was putting together online training because we realized we can't fix this problem until people know about it. So we whittled this big issue down into little online courses that anybody can take for less than the cost of a movie ticket for schools and families and for the corporate sector. And we're actually transferring those courses over to a new platform. So we're offline at the moment, but we expect to be back online shortly. So the good thing is we could train an entire school district. We can train an entire workforce in about a half an hour on your lunch break. And then when I first fell down the rabbit hole, I didn't have anybody I could speak to about this issue. And then little by little, we started finding one another, others in the state of Massachusetts who understood about this. And we eventually formed Massachusetts for Safe Technology. And I have a good research repository out at this link. We have highlights of what we're doing at the state level to try and move the needle to safe technology. And we have pages for upcoming events like this one, where anybody can go and sign up to learn. And we also have a news page that captures what's happening at the local level, because most of our mainstream media is owned by the very companies that promote this toxic technology. So we don't get true investigative reporting through mainstream media anymore. Too much of a conflict of interest. So we're very grateful for Massachusetts for safe technology and to partner with our friends at New Hampshire for safe technology and others around the country. I like to include this next link here because if you're wanting to share this issue with other people and time is short, I was invited to co-chair the technology panel at the Health and Buildings Roundtable Conference at the National Institutes of Health. And I was so fortunate to bring into this panel the retired president of Microsoft Canada, Frank Clegg. He figured out in his retirement what was going on with wireless. And so he came to talk about his industry and how they can do much better if given a nudge. We also had Dr. Martin Paul, who's one of the world's leading scientists on this issue. And then we had Theodora Scorato from the Environmental Health Trust, which is arguably the world's largest database and think tank on this issue. And then we had Peter Sullivan, who is a philanthropist with Clearlight Ventures, and he got really sick. He used to be a fighter pilot before he went to work in Silicon Valley as an engineer, and he was exposed to heavy doses of microwave radiation. And he started getting sick. And then when his children, his little boys, came into the preschool years, both of them wound up on the autism spectrum. And then years later, Peter figured out the connection to wireless radiation, and neither one of his sons is on the autism spectrum anymore. And that was the first I had even heard that in some cases, you can heal from autism. I didn't even know that was a possibility. So Peter came and joined us, and all of our talks were limited to 10 minutes or less. So this is a really highly credible place to send people to learn about this issue, especially people who work in the healthcare industry, because it was held at the National Institutes of Health. So one of the main gaps we had when I first figured this stuff out is we had so many people being misdiagnosed, and we had no way to train our doctors, our nurses, our first responders, and other healthcare practitioners. And now we are so very grateful for the 2 EMF medical conferences. Let me just step back and give you a few terms. EMF stands for electromagnetic fields of radio frequency microwave radiation. That's what's being pulsated out of our cell phones, out of cell towers, out of small cells, out of utility smart meters, and all the other accoutrements we've bought into. It pulses this two-way microwave radiation or electromagnetic fields or radio frequency, but that's what's carrying our signals and data back and forth. And today's message is certainly not no technology, because we love it and we live by it, but it's high time we learn the facts so that we can make safety choices around this technology. So that's my story and how I got involved in this. But let's look to what caused my schools to become the first in the nation to even have that little sign hanging in our classrooms. And I will tell you, it's just a sign. They have not turned off the radiation on the children and the teachers. They're waiting for higher authorities to tell them what to do. But at the time, it was a really courageous first step to start recognizing that we need to be careful around wireless. So anybody with us today who has an iPhone, I invite you to take that out and go into settings. Now, if you don't have an iPhone, there's a website called See the Fine Print, and we will make my slides available for you after the presentation in the next day or so. And anything with the blue line, you can click on it and you'll be able to get right down to the resources that we're speaking to. So once you are in an iPhone on settings, go down just a little ways and hit general. On an old phone, you'd hit about, but most people go right from general all the way down to legal and regulatory. Hit that. Once you hit legal and regulatory, about 4 down from the top, you'll see RF exposure. That's this radio frequency radiation that they politely call energy in this fine print disclaimer. And when we read this, it tells us that the device was tested at a distance away from the body. So if you're holding that device while it's radiating, or if you're tucking it in your bra or your suit pocket or your shirt pocket or your waistband or your back pocket, you are exceeding the Federal Communication Commission's public radiation exposure limits. And those limits, by the way, were never biologically safety tested. All they did was say, okay, if we put a radiating phone up to a mannequin's head that's filled with gel and we put a probe inside the gel, how much heat would it take in a half an hour to raise the temperature of this standard anthropomorphic mannequin that is built to be in the 90th percentile of military fitness, like 6'2", 220 pounds, which resembles a whole lot of none of us. How much heat would it take to raise the temperature? Well, so the FCC set those public radiation exposure limits based on heat. It's called the thermal effect. They set them way up high. And what we'll find in the science that we're going to look at in a minute is you don't need heat. Hundreds of thousands of times below that thermal threshold, we have all sorts of biological effects happening. So, but seeing that legal fine print, I think, is what prompted my school district to even hang that sign on the wall of all of our classrooms to cover their legal backside. But they're still waiting for higher authorities to tell them what to do. So this is one of these invisible toxins that, you know, if the pandemic's taught us anything, we need to be really aware of what's in our environment, even if it's invisible. So I talked to my friend Wendy, who tipped me off about this. We played around with an AM radio and we put the dial between stations and discovered that that is a way to hear extra radiation exposure limits. You could hear it going when we got next to a radiating antenna. And then I discovered there are actually professional meters to measure that with. And so I thought, you know what? I was our grant coordinator at our schools at the time. I knew that we had a pot of money in our town through a grant fund. And I thought, what if we got a grant to put a meter in our library and gave a meter to the schools? And, you know, my mind goes to solutions. But when I had the conversation with our board of selectmen that distributes the funding, the first application, they were like, we don't really know about this. Come back next cycle. So the second time I come back and they say, this is probably more of a Board of Health issue. So I went and I met with the Board of Health and I figured out that they had no idea what this issue was. And our town health director actually was around back in the 90s working for a municipality when the first cell towers were coming in. And he was told that at the local level, they have to follow the state and the state has to follow the feds. So I checked in with our state and our state was working on some fact sheets around this. And this again was back in 2013, 2014. I actually helped them to write subsequently an EMF fact sheet that I was told would be out in 3 months. And this was in 2016 and it has never seen the light of day. So anyway, I went and applied for a grant from my town. And by the third time around, I realized that I needed to meet with every one of our select board members one by one and teach them what this issue was. And so I did. And ultimately they said, okay, well, we're still a little iffy because nobody else is talking about this, but we'll give you funding for 1 meter conditionally if the library will agree to take it into circulation. And the reason I even got the idea for the library is that when those swirly CFL light bulbs were coming to market, which by the way, throw off a whole nother kind of man-made electromagnetic field for dirty electricity that's really unhealthy. So we should never have adopted those. They save us a little bit of money. And that's what this industry had done. They came into our libraries as they were promoting those new light bulbs and put a kilowatt meter on loan in our library. So presumably we could go home and plug it in with a new light and measure it against the old light and see how much money we would save by replacing all of our healthy incandescent light bulbs. So that's where I even got the idea. So I had to present to the Board of Trustees, and they ultimately voted, I think it was 4-1, to bring this device into circulation. And now most libraries actually have a library of things where they're loaning out products into the community. So we were very grateful to do that. Other libraries are now doing that as well. Citizens bring the issue to them. Sometimes the library has budget to put one in circulation. Other times somebody from the community will donate it. So we can help get that structure set up as well if you want to reach out. Now, out in Pittsfield, Massachusetts, Verizon put a cell tower on top of a neighborhood. And not long after it was activated, more than 20 children and adults, pets, pollinators, all became very impacted by the cell tower, to the point where families have had to abandon their homes because they got so sick and they could never escape it because it was radiating them 24/7. So they now have one of these meters in Pittsfield too. They have the Safe and Sound Pro 2 meter, which is what was recommended at that EMF medical conference, which the conference itself offers 24.5 continuing medical education credits. So any healthcare practitioner in the world can come and get certified to treat patients, to recognize, diagnose, treat, and most importantly, prevent these EMF or microwave sicknesses. But this Safe and Sound Pro 2 meter is the meter that was recommended at the medical conference. We have a chiropractor here in Massachusetts who bought one. She loans it out to her patients for $10 and says, now you have 2 hours, go home, do your scavenger hunt and find out where all the exposures are in your home, and then come back and we're going to teach you how to do safe technology. So here in my home, you see that we're in the blinking green. That's as good as we can get based on what I know. I just one by one swapped out everything that was radiating with a safe, hardwired technology option. And I'll teach you more about that too. So right now in my house, the reading I'm getting is 3.5. And the unit of measurement is a microwatt per square meter. So basically in 3 feet of air, how much radiation is there? In the scientific literature, they want us to be under 10 indoors. And so now I'm going to give you a demonstration. This is my cell phone. As a rule, I keep it in airplane mode because I don't want any radiation. And as I take it out of airplane mode, I'm going to demonstrate for you what happens. So now we're in the blinking red, which is the absolute worst end of the spectrum. That's what they call extreme. And I'm not even doing anything. This is just all the antennas coming online. I'm going to put it back in airplane mode. And you notice it takes a couple seconds to dissipate, but look, I'm back down into the green again. But I want to tell you, just turning that cell phone on, I have a cellular antenna, a Bluetooth, a Wi-Fi, a locator, a hotspot. And there's one more, oh, the data and the cellular. But all those are on as the way they give them to us. Now that we know, why would we radiate ourselves with 6 antennas if we're only needing to communicate through one? Maybe you're just sending a text. Maybe you're just making a quick call. But turn off everything that you're not using. So when I turned that on, the reading I got was 651,000. We want to be 10 or less. We were at 651,000. And that was just from one device. Think about our kids in a classroom with 20 or 30 wireless devices radiating, plus the infrastructure, plus the smart board, plus all the metal from the desks and the cabinets. Metal amplifies radiation, and the harm is cumulative. So our goal is to learn and then reduce it as much as we can. So my local cable station was very gracious to send a gentleman to my home, and we videotaped common exposures in everybody's homes. And then we showed suggestions for how to remediate that. So this little 23-minute public service announcement you might find useful. So what does the science actually tell us? In the long term, we are seeing child and adult cancers, and this National Toxicology Program study over here. So the NTP is the world's gold standard for toxics research. The NTP 20 years ago went to investigate whether cell phones could be harmful, because that was the technology of the day 2 decades ago. They went in expecting everything should be fine. And instead, after 20 years, they had an unprecedented 3-day peer review at the National Toxicology Program with world-leading doctors and scientists whose life's work is electromagnetic fields and this radiation. They determined at the end of this unprecedented 3-day peer review, clear evidence of cancerous tumors and DNA damage, among other findings. Clear evidence is the highest of 5 category rankings they could have given. Clear evidence. Now, the industry will spin every good study that comes out and try and downplay it. And they'll say, oh, that's just one study. More, you need more science. Well, right on the heels of our big study in the US, in Italy, the Ramazzini Institute completed another large study from cell towers, and they had the same findings as us: cancerous tumors, DNA damage, and a host of other harms. So we don't need more science. We need education and facts and choices. So DNA damage, we know, is our DNA is the roadmap to grow proper anything, be it a child, a plant, a pollinator, an animal. Any biome needs to have proper DNA, and this damages DNA. It was when I read the infertility studies that I got on my feet. They have taken male human sperm and exposed it to a laptop with the antennas radiating. It slowed the motility of the sperm. It caused apoptosis, which is programmed cell death, and it damaged the DNA in 4 hours of radiation exposure from a laptop. So that was the day I found my voice and started this conversation with our schools. We know now that this microwave radiation is a neurotoxin. Dr. Martha Herbert founded the Autism Lab at Massachusetts General Hospital, and she sees huge links between what we know about microwave radiation and what she sees in the families in her care. Dr. Hugh Taylor, who heads up the OBGYN program at Yale Medical School, he's a scientist and a medical doctor, and he has done some of the rodent studies, and he exposed the pregnant mice to radio frequency radiation, or wireless. And when those pups came out, they would be bouncing off the walls, as he said, resembling very much what we see in children with ADD, ADHD. And then Dr. Martin Paul just finished a recent study looking at all the science on Alzheimer's, and we are now seeing it come in at earlier and earlier stages. Like cancer, it used to take about 25 years before we would see the effects of Alzheimer's. Now it's not people just in their 70s and 80s, it's 60s and 50s and 40s and 30s, and even now in some cases, kids in their 20s are getting diagnosed with Alzheimer's. So here's what we know about this. We have something called the blood-brain barrier, and it's a membrane that protects sensitive areas like the brain. We also have a gut barrier as well. Normally, our blood will escort toxins out of the body. Now, what the science is showing is this constant spiked erratic pulsation of microwave radiation is permeating that blood-brain barrier. It's opening it up. So now, instead of escorting the toxins out of the body, they can now find their way into the brain, which explains a lot of the neurotoxicity that we're seeing today. PANS, PANDAS, autism, Alzheimer's, ADD, ADHD, and more. But we're very grateful that even though mainstream media won't report on this, there are other groups that are. And some of you may be familiar with the Environmental Working Group. And I first learned about their great work over the pesticides used in our foods. Some of you might know about the Clean 15 and the Dirty Dozen list that they put out, telling us which foods we should really try and buy organic if we can, and which traditionally grown foods with chemicals we might be able to do okay with because they don't penetrate into the part that we eat so much. So we're very grateful that the Environmental Working Group has now got a dedicated staff on this. There's a PhD who's putting out reports like this one, effects of radio frequency radiation on the nervous system. And they've also come up with another one saying that we need to change our laws to protect children because what we're doing today is far too heavy of an exposure for our kids. And as Dr. Om Gandhi teaches us in this graphic here, children are not just little adults. Everything about them is still under construction. Their central nervous system, their immune system, their brains, their skulls. And when we look at this graphic, these are heads turned sideways up here in the modeling, and the little yellow part is the ear. When you put a cell phone up to the ear of an adult, it's actually penetrating into our brain about a third of the way. On a 10-year-old whose skull is thinner and who has a higher water content in the brain, remember our microwave ovens operate by heating up the water, right? On a 10-year-old, it's permeating about 3/4 of the way into the brain. And on a 5-year-old, it's going almost all the way through the entire child's brain. So we need to be judicious and never, ever give a child a radiating device, download the applications, put the phone in airplane mode, and make sure every one of those antennas are turned off. So those are the long-term effects. The short-term effects, a lot of people recognize when we open up this conversation. And I want you to know that even though many of us are new to this conversation, as far back as 2002, our own government, through the Americans with Disabilities Act, recognized what they term electromagnetic sensitivities. Sometimes the acronym for that is EMS or EHS for electrohypersensitivity. We don't like to use the word hyper, though, because the industry likes to use that to make this sound like it's fringe. So we prefer the ADA's choice of words, which is electromagnetic sensitivity. And some of us would even qualm with the word sensitivity. We're not sensitive to it. We're being harmed by an environmental exposure. Our bodies are telling us we shouldn't be around it. But what does the science tell us, and what are people experiencing? Insomnia is a huge one. And scientifically now we understand why when it comes to radio frequency. This is a man-made invisible light form, a light energy. So as our circadian rhythm goes around its 24-hour clock, in the wee hours of darkness, we normally would release melatonin from the pineal gland in the brain. Melatonin would go in and regulate our sleep, and then it would also help to escort the toxins of the day out of the body. If we have this invisible light energy form on while we're supposed to be sleeping, guess what? The brain thinks the lights are on and it doesn't properly release the melatonin. That's an easy fix. Turn everything off during your sleeping hours is the first step. Headaches, stabbing, searing headaches, migraines that our doctors can't figure out. Nosebleeds and ear bleeds. My daughter, when she was in high school, got a migraine. What kid should be getting a migraine? And she was also getting nosebleeds. And after I stopped circling my tail and decided to protect myself and my family, we got rid of the wireless. Her headaches and nosebleeds all but disappeared unless she allowed herself to get dehydrated. And then this chronic fatigue that so many people are experiencing, pain from unidentified sources, skin, heating, flushing, rashes, tingling. We have like little antennas in our skin, and they are activated by this constant invisible pulsation of microwave radiation. I know for me, if I hold an active device, my tell is that my pinky finger starts to tingle. And scientifically, we know why that is, and a lot of these other symptoms too. Our red blood cells are meant to free float and bring oxygen to all of our organs and all of our biological systems. That's healthy oxidation of our cells. What we see is something called the rouleau effect under a microscope. So if you have microwave radiation, instead of free floating, these are electromagnetic fields, right? Or pulses. They're causing the red blood cells to magnetize and form a chain. And then that chain can't free float and get to where it needs to bring oxygen to all of our systems. So oxidative stress is a really big problem with this technology. And as healthcare practitioners know, oxidative stress and mitochondria dysfunction, these are precursors to most of our chronic illnesses. So we just need to learn and then learn to remediate. And we're going to teach you that tonight too. So heartbeats that go too fast or too slow, cognitive impairment where we can't think, anger, behavior issues. Gosh, at the EMF medical conference, if you attend that, and the public is welcome to attend as well, you don't have to be a healthcare practitioner. You can just sign up to license the whole conference. I think you can get it for like $39 if you don't need the credits. And you will hear from the doctors and the scientists. But one of the most heartbreaking things I heard them say is that we are biologically changing the gray matter and the white matter of the brain. And they said we can well expect to see more societal outbursts as we do that to ourselves, where we have seen these mass shootings and other tragedies unfolding. We got to stop changing the structure of our brain with microwave radiation. So anxiety, depression, suicidal ideation, even before the pandemic, we were at epidemic proportions. And we wonder why so many people are falling apart as we immerse ourselves deeper and deeper into this electrosmog. Dr. Martin Pall went back to the science and he mined all of the studies, and he does these amazing review papers where he collects all the data and then tells us what he's found. This one is microwave frequency electromagnetic fields produce widespread neuropsychiatric effects, including depression. And again, all of these resources and all of the science you can find at this link here. So, and it's not just you and I'll quickly go over, it's every living thing on the planet, and you can get to these resources at this link. But our poor little pollinators, you know, the neonicotinoids and other toxins are bad enough, but now we're radiating all of our poor species. So these new millimeter waves that are coming out with 5G are just about the same size as our pollinators. And it's not only taking some of them out outright, but like the birds, when we've seen 5G being tested, for example, in the Netherlands, in The Hague, there were hundreds of birds that dropped dead from the sky when they fired up the 5G antennas. But we also know that all of our pollinators and birds and other species have a sensor in their brain or in their beaks that allows them to synchronize to the Earth's natural electromagnetic field, which is what we call Schumann's resonance. And that oscillates from the Earth, this energy form, at 7.83 hertz. A hertz is a little tiny pulsation. Today, when we talk about megahertz and gigahertz, mega means 1,000,000 cycles per second. Gigahertz is 1,000,000,000 cycles per second. And our Earth and us, we're calibrated to 7.83 hertz. So it explains why we're getting inundated and our bodies and our planet can't handle this. Greenpeace did a report in 2012, and the analysts indicated that if the cloud, or all of this technology, were a country, it would be the 5th largest consumer of energy in the world. And that was 10 years ago. And look at the electro pollution we've added and added and added in those last 10 years. So all these other things are to be considered. The mineral extractions and the human atrocities that are going on in the Congo and elsewhere to get the many, many minerals that go into every single one of our electronic devices. If we really understood that, we would never toss aside a perfectly good device just to get the latest and greatest shiny new object. We would use everything till its full useful life and then be darn sure to recycle what we already mined from our world. So all these other things here, data warehouse networks, personal devices, are constantly using energy to run. For our own selves, streaming uses huge amounts of data. Don't stream. Download something to your device and then go in an airplane mode and enjoy it. But if you stream live, you're consuming a whole lot of energy. Every time we send and receive using a wireless connection. Every time we charge, recharge, we are using up our poor planet. And then in the background, everyone's trying to get us to get their apps and put these on our devices. And if we do, they're constantly doing updates in the background. So take an honest look at your devices and wipe off everything that you don't use on a regular basis. Otherwise, you're consuming unnecessary energy. So when I fell down the rabbit hole, I kept thinking, surely, if this is as bad as the science that I'm finding, and I'm just little me, right? Somebody's got to have our backs on this. So why don't we know? Well, as I mentioned, the wireless industry owns mainstream media. They own a lot of our legislators, and this is a big tobacco playbook on steroids. We can't even smell it like we can with big tobacco. But once we learn, a lot of people recognize that they are actually feeling the symptoms. And if you're not feeling them today, don't kid yourself, because these exposures, like any toxin, are cumulative with dose. The longer we saturate ourselves in microwaves, the greater the risk that we are going to become ill. So in 2015, Harvard's Law School Center for Ethics came out with this amazing free online report that indicates that our Federal Communication Commission is dominated by the industries it presumably regulates. So I love the graphic that they chose because it's a revolving door. So the people who are sitting as commissioners, most of them came directly from the wireless industry. So they are not there to protect the public. They're there to protect corporate interests. So when this came out in 2015, I went, oh, that was my missing puzzle piece. Nobody's got our backs on this right now. So that's when I found my voice and realized that, hey, I'm a mom. I can do something about this. And so I did. I started the conversation with my schools, then I went to my legislature, and now I've walked away from my tech writing career to help move the needle towards safe technology. It's really an honor to be with you tonight to help spread that information. So Captured Agency is online. And remember that $30 million study by the National Toxicology Program that found clear evidence of cancerous tumors? That was commissioned by the Food and Drug Administration 20 years ago. That report should have triggered public policy to protect you and I and everything on the planet. Instead, the gentleman who heads that up today, the radiation area at the National Toxicology Program, he turned around to the FCC and said, nothing to look at here. Go ahead and keep doing what you're doing. Well, one might ask, what would ever possess Dr. Shuren to do that? Well, when we look into his background, we see that he's married to a woman who's a partner in a law firm that represents, guess who? The wireless industry and a whole lot of the other environmental polluters. So there's no cavalry coming, you guys. We have to learn this, and we have to decide for ourselves, what can we do? None of us imagined we'd have to clear space on our plates to take this one on, but if we don't, who will? This corruption goes all the way up to the World Health Organization. Because those animal studies were done, they have reopened their investigation. So back in 2011, based on the existing science, the World Health Organization classified radiofrequency EMFs as a group 2B possible human carcinogen. That's the middle of 5 categories where we still need to do more science, but it looks like there's something here. Same category as lead, thalidomide, DDT, and a whole other host of chemicals that I can't even pronounce. This is where radiofrequency stands today. Then the animal studies were completed, and now the experts who sat on that review in 2011 are calling for a reclassification as a group 1 known human carcinogen, or at least a probable human carcinogen. We know enough scientifically, so they have reopened their investigation. And in the next couple of years, we should have some review from what this is. They're looking at cancers, they're looking at infertility, they're looking at electrohypersensitivity, neurotoxicity, and more. However, there are 2 groups. Let me go back. There are 2 groups at the World Health Organization. One is the good, independent scientists who want to get to the truth and get it out to the public. There's the other group that is formed by industry. And so now we're looking to see if they're stacking the deck at the World Health Organization for this other review so they can drag it out longer and longer while they deploy all their toxic technology. So we've got our work cut out for us here. So that's all the bad news, you guys. Now let's focus on the good news. It's not rocket science to fix. So in our homes, if you flip around the back of your router, you'll see that you have a cable coming in from the street to your house that hooks into your router. And on the back of that, there's Ethernet ports. All you have to do is get a big long Ethernet cable and run it to the room where you use most of your technology. And then most of us have more than one device, so you can get this little Ethernet switch. They come in all different lengths. You could get one with like 28 ports in it for a classroom. But it allows you to plug in to your router and then plug in separate cables for each one of your devices, like a cell phone. Who knew? You can buy a little $30 adapter for the iPhone, or for your tablet or your laptop. You can buy adapters, and each one of these internet ports, Ethernet ports, has a direct connection to the internet. So you're not competing for bandwidth off of your boosters and stuff. So it's really far better technology than anything you're going to get with wireless. So once you get your hardwired setup, and you can forward your phone calls from your cell phone to your landline. Some people have given up their landlines, but again, it's a choice of what you might choose to do towards safe technology. So first step is get your equipment to hardwire. It typically won't break the bank. This is about $100 setup to do these 2 devices. And then you just need to go into each device and turn off all the antennas, right? You can sit down at your computer, call your internet service provider. They'll tell you how to get into your online account if you don't already know how. You go into wireless settings and you turn off every antenna that's in there. But it's really important to measure, because with the Internet of Things, they want to put a radio frequency antenna or multiples in just about every device that you're going to buy today. And you're going to radiate yourself and everybody in your house and your pets and your neighbors and everybody around you. So you really need to measure. Putting one of these on loan in your library is a great community-minded thing to do, to share with others. Some neighbors go together to get one. That one that was recommended at the medical conference is, I think, about $385. There are other littler ones that you can get for under $200. And we can certainly help you through these links to figure out where to get those devices. But if you don't measure, how are you going to know? And I'll give you a good example that we just faced. Our stove was going on the fritz. So my husband ordered a new one and had it delivered. And when it came in, I saw it was a smart stove. And so I looked at the control panel and there was nothing in there that allowed me to turn off the radio frequency antenna. Somebody might ask, why do you want a smart stove? Well, the industry is pushing it, new, great, shiny object, right? Hey, you can turn on your stove from Italy if you want, whatever. It's connected to the internet. And from your cell phone, you can control it. Sounds kind of crazy to walk away from a hot object in your house, but to each its own. So then I looked in the manual and in the manual, when I read the RF disclaimer in there, it says to stay, what was it, like 20 centimeters stay away from the antennas, 20 centimeters. Well, that's like 7 or 8 inches. I don't know about you, but I can't cook on my stove standing in the middle of my kitchen. So I called tech support. They didn't know. They called me back and then they scheduled a call. This technician shows up at my house and I brought out my meter and showed him how much it was radiating. It was going over 1 million and I want to be under 10 in my house. And he'd never heard anything about this. So he calls his tech support and he kind of got into a huff when I said, my goal is to get to 10, and he pulls out his cell phone and it caused my meter to go high again. And he said, well, I'll go out to my truck, and he storms out of my house. And then he comes back in and he takes off the back panel of my stove, and right behind the digital display, that's where the motherboard is. And next to that was this little tiny board with the radiation antenna in it. And all he had to do was unplug it from the motherboard. Then he tied it up into a nice little knot in case the next person who owns my home wants to plug that sucker back in. And then I measured again and it was completely off. So he was very gracious though, as he was putting everything back together. He thanked me because he learned something that day. And then I was walking him out and he turned to me and he said, I never buy these wireless technologies. I just go online and find the old school appliances where he knows how to fix them outright and that they're not radiating. So I said, well, where do you find them? Because if you go to Lowe's or Home Depot, all they're pushing is the newest models. And he says, I just get them online. So let that be a lesson to us all. We need to be very vigilant about what we're allowing into our homes, and having an RF detection meter is the only way you're really going to know. So we've talked about our personal devices, but let's look at the other things that we may or may not have control over. The industry came in and started telling our towns, hey, new technology, we can save your town money. You won't have to pay the meter readers to come out and get the readings for your gas, water, and electric meters every month. You don't have to pay those guys so much. First, they did a drive-by and they started putting these digital meters, smart meters on our homes, where the guy in the truck could point his scanner at our home as he drives by, get the reading, and then drive to the next house. So that was a cost save for our towns. But what they did is they put these utility meters on our homes that turn out, they don't just pulse that one time when the guy drives by, they're pulsing 24/7 microwave radiation. And so when I was testifying with the Massachusetts Department of Public Utilities, I created a little 3-minute video and I put my daughter's doll in my dining room on the floor on the other side of the wall from where these meters are mounted. And I have 2 electric meters, one for solar, one for electric. And I measured how often they pulsed out of the green zone and into the yellow or red, 17,000 times a day. So if you have somebody on the other side of the wall, like this brochure here shows us, they're getting radiated. And at the medical conference, a lot of the doctors were saying when these smart meters go in, they see a lot of sick people coming through their doors. So, and another risk is that if they're not installed well, this radio frequency loves metal. It amplifies on metal. So the radiation can hop on the wires of the pipes of your home and virtually turn your whole home into a big giant antenna. So we also have record of fires, explosions from improper grounding. And for those who care about privacy, the industry is harvesting our data and selling it off to third-party vendors. And as I said at the medical conference, this is a leading cause of sudden onset microwave sickness. It's also a big environmental justice issue because, as many toxic industries do, they push these products into communities where people are impoverished or working 3 jobs just to get food on the table and a roof over their heads. They don't have time to even know about these issues. And then once one of these toxins is brought in, the company will say, hey, look, it was successful out in Worcester, Massachusetts. Hey, New York. Hey, Rhode Island. Look how great we did here. Now let's roll it out in your state. And now let's roll it out all across Massachusetts. This is how they do it. So it's a huge environmental justice issue. Jeremy Johnson was a Silicon Valley engineer, and he is married to a woman who's a medical doctor, and both of them started getting really sick. Nothing in her training could teach them how to get well again until they figured out it was the bank of smart meters that went in on their condo, and they both got taken down. So Jeremy has done a TED Talk that's really good. It's helpful for people who work in engineering or physics or technology who don't want to believe this. Jeremy can talk us through this in about 15 minutes. So that's a good resource to share. And now Jeremy dedicates his time to helping others to learn and to remediate. So he's a really good hands-on consultant to speak with. The next source that we have no control over are cell towers. These are the big macro cell antennas that used to be 300 feet in the air in a industrial area of town. Now they're encroaching closer and closer and closer to where we live, where we go to school, where we worship, where we go for medical care, all of our recreation facilities. The towns get money, the property owners get money to mount these toxic antennas in the public access way or on their buildings, and they have no idea that the trade-off is our health. So it's critically important when we bring this to our towns that we talk about the non-industry funded science. And at this link, you'll go to my personal research repository. You know, I mentioned I'm a tech writer, so I just started organizing the data, and I created a very simple research repository so I can get back at stuff. And if anybody else, if it helps you too, I've created a navigation with different categories. I've got a page on cell towers that shows what the science is saying. These things have no business being within 500 meters or 1,640 feet from where we are. That's a slope in the science on the epidemiological studies or the studies that tell us what's actually happening in society. When we look at the slope of the death rate, the neurotoxicity, the insomnia, it starts coming down at this 500-meter mark. Inside here, people are getting very sick or dying. It doesn't actually catch up to the public normal death rates until double that at like 1,000 meters or 3,000 feet. But at least that 500-meter mark is a good starting point if you have to compromise. You can go to a website called antennasearch.com and put in any address in the US, and it will tell you within a 3-mile radius how many of these big macro antennas and cell towers are where you live or work or go to school. Here in Boston, when I put our State House address in, there were 70 of these massive towers and more than 1,000 of these big antennas. And at the time that I ran this report, Boston is so toxic, as are most of our major cities now, it could only return a 1-mile radius, let alone 3 miles, right? So when you look at a map, this is one of the Boston neighborhoods in Hyde Park. You can see the map at antennasearch.com of where all these things are, and you can drill into the actual addresses. So these are the big cell towers. And now the industry is spinning up 5G. The G just simply means generation in this case. So 3G, 4G, 5G, as each generation came along, we got more and more capability. We started with a cell phone at 1G, and then we added some texting at 2G, and then with 3G, we connected to the internet. And then with 4G, we basically had a whole computer at our disposal wirelessly. And now with 5G, The industry is promising fast streaming, entertainment downloads, smart cities, super highways. But look who's buying up the entertainment industry. This is their new revenue stream, one of them. 5G is a whole new technology. It's adding on millimeter waves. So right now, our cell phones operate off of these big, longer waves on the electromagnetic spectrum. These longer waves can penetrate through your home, through your school, through your car to reach your device. With 5G, all that's left to monetize are these teeny tiny little millimeter waves, and they can carry vast quantities of data, but they can't carry it very far, nor can they get through objects like buildings or snow or leaves or trees. So they're bundling all these many different frequencies together now to reach your 5G device. If you haven't bought a 5G device, please don't. You're not doing yourself any favors. So they're clear-cutting trees to put these antennas in at bedroom height in the public access way outside of our homes. Their goal is to put in millions of these every 2 to 12 houses in every community across the country. A cell tower right out in front of your home that you will never be able to escape. Think about what happened in Pittsfield, Mass. They had to abandon their homes. The kicker is this was never biologically safety tested, none of it. At a congressional hearing up in DC, Connecticut Senator Richard Blumenthal at a Commerce Committee meeting said to these two industry guys, so please share with us how much testing has been done, how much have you funded for independent scientific investigation before rolling out 5G? And the guys just kind of hemmed and hawed and then said, we don't know of any independent science that's been done. So Senator Blumenthal said, so as far as health and safety are concerned, we're flying blind here. And then Computer World and others who report on the industry say 5G is a bad joke. It's not even giving us these faster speeds. We were doing just fine for speed with 4G. So it's just monetizing. Follow the dollar. In January, Verizon put out a press release of how proud they were to be exposing 100 million people with access to 5G. Now, this is controversial because a lot of people shut off when you talk about COVID. But here's what we do know. We, as biological, energetic beings, only have so much energy in our cells. That is calibrated to do normal cell repair and regeneration. When we introduce an exposure to an environmental toxin, like wireless, our body starts having to work overtime to try and clean up that damage. And then when you have a virus come in on top of that, we have even less energy left to deal with that. So what Dr. Beverly Rubik and Dr. Rob Brown, who's a radiologist, did is they went and looked at where 5G has been deployed with this close range nonstop radiation, and then looked to see what the COVID case rates and COVID death rates were. And there were statistically significant increases in both of those categories where 5G has been adopted. So that's important to look at. It's not that we're saying 5G caused the pandemic. What we are saying is our bodies can only fight this battle for so long. So Dr. Magda Havas up in Canada is a professor emeritus, which means she retired with, accolades after teaching 25 years of microwave radiation, EMFs, at Trent University. She knows that our governments, by and large, are not monitoring this cumulative impact in our societies. So Dr. Havas is asking for us to serve as citizen scientists and to use this meter to go out into your community and measure. And she has a great little protocol that takes an hour or two to do. You write your data down on your clipboard, and then you just go enter it into her database on your computer. And you can see all these different levels of microwave radiation. And green, of course, is where we'd all want to be. In our houses, we want to be under 10 microwatts per square meter. Outside, presuming we have a clean place to detox at home, they're saying in the scientific literature, if you could get down to even 1,000 outside, your body could probably catch up to that indoors when you sleep in a clean environment. So green is good. G is for green, A is for amber, R is for red, and B is for black. She calls this brag. Can you brag about your community? So we've gone in, I was on vacation at my sister's in Atlanta. I did some readings there. Deb Hodgson and I did some readings up in New Hampshire. I've done the towns surrounding me and my town. And you can zoom into this and see when those readings were taken and what did we find. Black is blackout, really bad. So you can go see what these guidelines are. You can go to globalemf.net. And if you think you might want to help her with this study, there, Rob Metzinger from Safe Living Technologies produces this Safe and Sound Pro 2 meter. It retails for $385, but if you agree to help Dr. Havas with her study, then he offers a discount, and you can email here for that discount code. I think I paid a couple of years ago about $308. So that's an incentive to go ahead and get yourself a meter, or go in with your neighbors and get one together, or donate one to your library, and then everybody in your town could help with this study. So just some common exposures that we're seeing. Again, we want to be under 1,000. At the fire department in Westmoreland, somebody clocked that in at 417, still doing okay. Keene, New Hampshire, at this time was about 7,000, but they're now pushing in these small cells at the curb. So we should take some new measurements when those come online. In Nashua, we're already in the red zone. Concord in the red zone. Stratham blacked out down the main strip where they put up a massive cell tower. Here in the North End in Boston, see this pretty little street lamp on Hanover Street? Heavily trafficked by tourists all year long. This is where all of our amazing Italian restaurants are. But look right above, this was a big immigrant community back around the time of World War II. And we had a lot of immigrants come in and live, and a lot of people still live right above all of the restaurants and stuff. And so they're putting these at street level right outside people's homes. And these are cell towers that are glammed up to look like a pretty lamp. And when you walk down Hanover Street and you look down the crossroads, they didn't put these pretty ones in. There's a really ugly gray monopole right outside people's homes. So that's what 5G and the Internet of Things is, unless we learn and take the resources available to us and talk to our towns. So Martin Luther King Jr. taught us that when we have important changes in society, it comes through 3 channels. One, like we've been discussing, the public becomes educated, learns, and then decides to do something. So that's us. The courts rule and take accountability down to the level of the polluters, and then public policy catches up. So we'll spend the next couple of minutes just quickly going over great inroads here, but I encourage you to drill down through the links in here so you can know it for yourself. In the law, the FCC has now been sued when the Food and Drug Administration told the FCC they don't have to do anything differently. That decision went into something called the Federal Register. Once that hit the Federal Register, then the lawsuits could happen. Children's Health Defense, the Environmental Health Trust, and others all individually filed lawsuits. They were all combined together. And at the end of the day, the FDA had no homework to show the courts that they can justify radiating at the levels that they determined were okay in 1996. So it's been remanded back to, so these guys won the lawsuit, and now it's been sent back to the FCC to do better, but they didn't put a time limit on it. So we've still got the foxes watching the hen house. We're hopeful, though, that little by little, we will make those changes. There are other lawsuits that are happening. This middle one, people who worked in the industry for a long time really started seeing this shell game where we were taxed on our internet bills. There was a lot of federal money given to bring the right solution, which is hardwired fiber, cable, or copper, right to the premises where we can just choose to hook up indoors with cables of our own and have safe technology. The irregulators, as they call themselves, figured out that there was this shell game going on. All that hardwired money, a lot of it got taken by industry and put in their wireless bucket because it's cheaper, faster to put in wireless infrastructure, and it's a whole new revenue stream for the industry. So they took our money and they used it not for what it was intended. So the irregulators won a lawsuit that apparently opens up the gateway for our states to go back and recoup that money to now do the right solution of bringing fiber right to our homes and businesses and schools. This lawsuit, Morey versus Motorola, has been in action for over 20 years. Family after family has joined this lawsuit as loved ones developed those glioblastoma, highly deadly brain tumors and other tumors. And there are still some who are alive today. Many of them have died. But just this last month, the court in DC, a judge was listening to today's evidence. And in the coming weeks or months, we should hear his ruling as to whether this case can now go to trial. And we are praying it finally does, because too many people have already died from this. So lots of good things happening. Americans for Responsible Technology has a petition with the FDA to say we need to declare an imminent hazard here and inform the public that this is a toxin. Here in Massachusetts, we've seen incredible inroads. Our state level Board of Health organization has a guideline for legal action, and now they have 4 pages and they're talking about the risks with cell towers. So that's something we can share. And then in Pittsfield, the Board of Health is the first in the country to do an independent investigation, to meet with the doctors who are diagnosing these families, to meet with the scientists. And we have brought in many public health forums that are recorded. Anybody in your town can go listen and learn. And then Pittsfield's Board of Health became the first in the country to issue a cease and desist emergency order to Verizon to say, okay, before we issue cease and desist, please come to the table. Let's be grown-ups about this and talk about how to fix this problem. They need to turn off those cell antennas, and they need to move that tower to the far corner of the 60-acre property back up in the commercial district where the address was on the application, instead of coming to the corner on top of this neighborhood. Verizon is not a good corporate citizen. They did not come to the table. Instead, at the 11th hour, they went to the courts and said, we want an injunction against Pittsfield because we think what they're doing is illegal. Shamefully, Pittsfield's mayor, their city solicitor, their city councilors would not back up their own Board of Health who investigated, and they wouldn't give them the money to take this through the courts. So now there are other legal actions being filed in Pittsfield. There's a civil suit there where the citizens are having to sue the entire town for conflicts of interest. Their town attorney, the solicitor, has conflicts of interest with industry. It's ugly all the way around, and these people deserve to get back into their homes. But all these first in the nation things are going to make it easier for you to open this conversation with your town. Here at the Face School in Massachusetts, it's a very prestigious international boarding school that has the best of everything, including toxic technology. Children were getting sick, and there was a federal lawsuit. And for the first time, although they didn't win the actual court case, for the first time, a US court recognized that you don't have to have heat to have harm. They recognize these biological effects at the non-thermal level. So court cases build off each other. We get stronger with every single one. And there are many more. In a school district, teachers were getting sick after the Common Core standardized testing went in, and they just lit up the building with all of this wireless to have the kids use iPads and stuff to do testing all at once. And teachers got walloped. So there was a lawsuit here for a teacher who was promised accommodations. The school reneged, and the judge upheld that you reneged. You need to settle with this woman and take care of her. So that's taken place, and there are just lawsuits happening all over the world. The third area that Martin Luther King Jr. taught us about, first was the public, second is the courts, third is public policy. There's a lot happening, but we'll focus on the leading national example, which is New Hampshire, which is why we're partnering with our friends at New Hampshire for Safe Technology tonight, because we want to empower everybody in New Hampshire with information to work with their legislators and say, this is critical. This is beyond critical. We should have fixed this yesterday. Representative Patrick Abrami is Deb's representative. He came knocking to be reelected, and she invited him in and shared what happened to her and how she got so sick. Doctors couldn't figure it out. Experts, specialists couldn't figure it out until Deb did her research and figured it out and taught him the science. And Rep. Abrami's an engineer, and he'd only been taught about that thermal effect. But thank goodness he is a man with integrity. And he went and did his deep dive into the science and had this major wow moment, like, wow, what are we doing? So he started a bill. Deb introduced him to me. They hopped in his car from New Hampshire, drove down to Massachusetts. We sat at my kitchen table, taught him the underpinnings of what the industry is doing. So he beefed up his bill with all these great questions. Why do Lloyd's of London, Swiss Re, AM Best already recognize this as a world-leading risk, and they have exclusions in their policy? It goes floods, EMFs, earthquakes in their policies, that we won't cover damages. So that leaves our towns, our schools holding the bag for damages. So we need to get this stuff away from people who can potentially be harmed by this. Why does that legal fine print that we talked about tonight even exist? Why is the FCC ignoring thousands of studies? Why do they only talk about heat? Why do we allow 100 times more radiation exposure than certain other countries? And why is nobody looking at the cumulative effect of all this electrosmog? So in 2019, we came up and testified, Deb, me, Jen, Lori, other people in New Hampshire. We brought in heavy hitters from industry. We brought in heavy hitters from science. And in 7 months, their House Committee on Science, Tech, and Energy advanced the bill. Their Senate Committee on Health and Human Services advanced the bill. Governor Sununu signed it into law that a commission had to be formed to investigate. And even during the pandemic, they spent an entire year with highly qualified experts, doctors, scientists, engineers, public health agencies, and the industry. Bring everybody to the table and let's see what we can learn. Then they came out with this groundbreaking, the best document we've got in the country. This is their commission. All of their procedures are documented, and then their final report that documents the conflicts of interest with the industry, the FCC, and the FDA. And then they make 15 recommendations for what we need to be doing to migrate from where we are, do the gap analysis, and get to safe, hardwired technology to and through the premises. That means don't put any more wireless in our schools, and let's start getting plans together to back away from what we've done until we can get to hardwired. And let's label every transmitting thing in our community so people know don't spend time near these antennas, near these smart meters, and let's get the public educated. So that came out at the end of 2019. They introduced a bill this year to start taking some of these recommendations. And let's start with a setback so that you can't put close range toxic technology right into our neighborhoods and other sensitive areas. So we just came through the legislation on this. There was also a clause in there to get the industry to pay for a registry of harm so that people like Lori and Jen and Deb and everybody else who's getting harmed can file their injuries. And then that information can inform public policy. So that bill went to the House Committee on Science, Technology, and Energy. And for the last 10 months, we've been presenting information to this House committee, and a lot of them didn't even recognize that that report was gold in their hands. And they had to report this out very quickly. And they said, we just need more time because we don't know this well enough. So when they said we need more time, that virtually kills the bill. But then they can do one of two things, either kill it outright or say, we want an interim study committee to really look at this. We just wrapped up that interim study committee and their recommendations on October 6th. And God bless them, 15 of the 18 that were present for this meeting said, yes, there is something here. And we want it to be publicly known that we endorse bringing bills forward in January that will give the public the right to know what the pros and cons are of wireless technology, and give our towns guidelines so that when the industry comes in and says, hey, we want to give you some money for these new antennas or these big macro cell antennas, and if you have any problem with it, hey, it's the law, you got to let us just, sign this application, we'll be good to go. That's what they're telling our towns. And that is simply not true. The law does not say that they have to put them right there outside of our homes. There's more than 20 things our towns can do to deter the industry from putting them in unsafe areas. So we were so grateful to get testimony and to teach these legislators what it is. They voted 15-3 to allow for new legislation in January. And one of the testimonies that came in was from Frank Clegg, who's that retired president of Microsoft Canada, who joined us for that panel at the National Institutes of Health. And in his testimony, among other really good things, and all these testimonies were delivered in 3 minutes, so they're short. So this is a good document to bring forward to your towns. But in it, he says, wireless technology is no longer advanced technology. It has outlived its useful life as a main source of connectivity. We need to be connecting to the internet through wires, not through airwaves with microwaves. So we did a rally at the State House. That was kind of fun. We'd never done one of those before, but we're not rebellious. We are peaceful demonstrators out there to raise awareness and to share information with the public. And so we did that rally, and then now we have permission to start doing real work in New Hampshire in January. So we'll be working on bills for that. And there's just example after example of communities that are taking action. The industry comes in and says, oh, you guys are the only ones talking about this in your town. It's the NIMBYs, not in my backyard, which is a lie. If you go out to Americans for Responsible Technology, you will see that there are more than 150 groups doing what we're doing, like New Hampshire for Safe Technology, like Massachusetts for Safe Technology. There are groups in many states and many, many groups in certain states. So go out there and see if there's somebody you can join today. If there's not, our friends at Americans for Responsible Technology have a whole toolkit to teach you how to get started. So you don't have to do the legwork to figure this out. There are so many great resources right now at your fingertips. And these are just examples of groups who are already taking action about cell towers and others. So let's learn from what's been done and jump in, because there's no cavalry coming to protect you or your town yet. We're working hard, but you need to take it on the local level. So, this is happening all over. And this is just some stuff from Massachusetts. So public servants are taking action now. In Easton, Connecticut, after a grandmother figured this out and brought it to her town, they put a moratorium on 5G until it can be proven safe. And then a year later, they just extended this spring their ban. So we can do this, you guys. Hawaii County banned 5G. They put a resolution in that they don't want it. Worldwide actions are taking place. So let's take inspiration from all of that, but nobody knows about it. So we need to share the good news. In our schools, the New York Times did a series of articles about what Silicon Valley executives are doing. They're actually banning screens from their children. They're sending their children to schools with no technology, not even hardwired, not wireless. They know that a child's brain does not develop best in front of a screen. They know it takes meaningful interactions with trusted adults, with their peers, and with the natural environment. They're even having their nannies sign contracts that there will be no screens around their children. And here they are pushing the 21st century classroom at our kids. But there's a solution for everything. Our friends, Patty and Doug Wood, who have Americans for Responsible Technology, they've also launched this wonderful program called Tech Safe Schools. They will send out a letter to your schools. So they have a contact us page there. They will send a letter to your school administrators, inviting them to come learn. They will talk to them about the biological health risks. They'll talk to them about the legal exposures that our schools have. And of course, the solutions on how to remediate. So take advantage of Tech Safe Schools. My little nonprofit is coming back online, where we've got online training that the entire school could be trained in about a half an hour. And then it kicks out a completion certificate at the end, because having worked in a school, I know that when I had to take anti-bullying, physical restraint, mandated reporter training, I had to turn a certificate into my human resources department, and they would check off who's done all the mandatory training. So you get a certificate at the end of this training too. So the Environmental Health Trust has worked so hard on this issue, and they have a ton of printable resources that you can just print out and take around with you, including they partnered with the Massachusetts Breast Cancer Coalition, and those folks created curriculum for elementary teachers, middle school teachers, and high school teachers. So there's a student module, a teacher module, and then a fact sheet to print out. So we have everything you need to get this conversation moving us to safe technology. Maryland was the first Department of Public Health to recommend that we hardwire our schools. And then our schools may already know about the U.S. Collaborative for High Performance Schools. This is a green school certification group, and Dr. Tony Stein worked with them to get a low EMF best practices module there. So we've got everything that you need. During the pandemic, Cyprus in the Mediterranean, this country came up with safety recommendations for studying at home during the pandemic, but they really apply for any child using technology at home and the family. If you can't hardwire, get as much distance as you can from the router and only download applications. And if you have to use wireless, only for the shortest amount of time available. And then they have exercises for the eye to take breaks to make sure you don't burn out your eyes. But just really, really good information that's here for all of us to use. Other resources, there's the EMF Medical Conference. Dr. Cindy Russell, Dr. Joel Moskowitz, and others founded Physicians for Safe Technology. So our healthcare practitioners at all times have a quick, easy place to go to look to see what to do and to know what the science is telling us. Another highly credible output from that Health and Buildings Roundtable Conference at the National Institutes of Health is a paper that Frank Clegg from Microsoft Canada and world-leading scientists and building biologists and doctors, they put out a paper after that conference called Building Science and Radio Frequency Radiation: What Makes Smart and Healthy Buildings? So this is a really good hands-on document to teach our towns and our construction folks how to get to a safe building. Here's Jeremy's TEDx talks, and then I have a web page at Understanding EMFs, which is available through my website at Mass for Safe Tech for our engineers and physicists. So other great things, building biology. Who knew there's an entire profession of certified experts who can come into your home and measure for radio frequency, for dirty electricity, and other man-made frequencies that we've allowed. And many of them are also certified to look for mold, for water water toxicity. These guys are the pros, and you can bring them in to your home or your schools or your workplaces. Generation Zapped is now available on Amazon Prime. It's now available through many of the streaming services with our libraries like Canopy and Hoopla. So you can actually watch Generation Zapped, this award-winning film, part of the United Nations Film Festival, and learn with your loved ones what this issue is, and then start taking actions. Over on PBS, Bert Wolf does a travel show. He's already done 2 episodes on this. And then we mentioned our friends at Americans for Responsible Technology has this amazing toolkit to hook up with other people in your area, to start a group of your own, and then has resources that you can hand to your town and say, hey, we need our zoning and planning folks and our town planner to get on this, and hire a good attorney, because most town attorneys are not experts in this. For example, there's Andrew Campanelli, who used to work for industry. Then he figured out the harm. Now, instead of industry, he represents municipalities and citizens, and he can be hired. I think his flat rate fee is $8,500 to go in and look at what your current code and law is, and then notice what the gaps are and show your towns exactly what they need to put into their code to be as protected as you can under current law. Because remember, the industry comes in and lies about what the law is and tells you you have no choice. But we can beef up our zoning laws, and many communities around the country are taking advantage of this. And mental health, right? We need to be the example for the children in our lives. If they see us on our devices all the time, guess what we just taught them? So we need to remember to set limits for ourselves and our children. And I love this poster here, 50 ways to take a break. Go back and do all the great things we always used to do. Tell jokes, go do a random act of kindness for your neighbors, go dance, go write, go do poetry, go to a music concert, go create music, go hang out in the hammock and just have quiet time. Go back to nature, go for a walk, go ground yourself. This Earth Prescription book by Dr. Laura Conover, I had read the first book called Grounding or Earthing, but basically I learned the science, and it's great to know that every living thing is meant to be connected to the Earth's energy, because that 7.83 hertz regulates all of our biological systems. It's like free healing energy. But now we walk around with rubber-soled shoes, and that doesn't allow the electrons to get up into our feet. And I live in the Northeast, so I can't go walking around barefoot all the time, right? Half the year I'm in boots. So Dr. Conover came up with this book called The Earth Prescription, and she takes it season by season to teach us how we can naturally ground without actually having to be barefoot all the time. Literally touching the high water contents of a plant, the trees, the leaves, the needles, the, whatever. You touch that and you are instantly grounded through the earth energy that's coming up through that tree. Same thing with our pets, the less furry parts. We pet them when they're on the ground, but you can't do it on blacktop because that's got a petrolatum product that seals it off. So read her book. I think you'll enjoy it. So lots of good resources here at the municipal level. Reinventing Wires, the Future of Landlines and Networks, Dr. Timothy Sheckley and others. Camilla Reese put out this amazing free online report that gives a dozen reasons, aside from health, why it's a raw deal for our towns to buy into any more wireless, and why and how we should be bringing fiber optics to and through the premises. So again, with our towns, they've only been told by industry. Now we need to teach them to differentiate the public interest versus the industry interest and get to the public priorities. So let's use these resources and always measure against biological effects, not these crummy limits that the FCC established. So the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention already has a really good model out there for us. For ionizing radiation, which is the kind that we wear a lead apron for X-rays, it can break the atom and do damage that way. Ionizing radiation is also the sun and gamma rays, and we would never leave ourselves exposed to any of that for any amount of time, right? Certainly not 24/7. So the ALARA principle that the CDC has stands for as low as reasonably achievable. That's our goal. And they talk about it in terms of 3 ways. 1, reduce your exposure. 2, create as much distance from a radiating device as you can. And 3, shield if you can't get away from it. Those all apply to how to get to safe technology with wireless as well. So many resources, but don't kid yourself. There is no safe level of man-made radiation. Dr. Linda Birnbaum used to be our leading scientist with the National Institutes of Environmental Health Sciences. She oversaw the National Toxicology Program. And in a recent interview, she said that there are still some really good people at the federal level, even though we know there are also captured agencies. But for real change to happen, it's probably going to have to be the sandwich approach. We need to keep educating at the federal level, but we've got to push up the pressure from the state and local. So let's get New Hampshire empowered to ripple out to all of our states. Let's keep educating ourselves, keep coming back for these free educational sessions that we're doing every month, and bring more and more people with you from all aspects of your life. From your healthcare practitioners, from your schools, from your town leaders, from your loved ones, from the skeptics. Bring them all, and let's just have the conversation. Oh, here's that fact sheet I wrote for my state Department of Public Health in 2016 that was supposed to be out in 3 months and has never seen the light of day. But it's a good example that others might take and actually do something with. So next steps. Our town should be forming safety committees now that technology is here to stay. They should always offer a no-fee opt-out on these digital utility meters until we can get them hardwired to the premises. People should be able to opt out of being radiated in their own home. Get to hardwired in our public spaces, and let's get our bylaws up to snuff. And don't be afraid to bring in somebody like Andrew Campanelli. So we do public education forums for local municipalities. Here's some examples if you want to share them with your town. And again, let's get our schools protected as fast as we can. And start where you are. Do you belong to professional associations? They're always looking for speakers. I can be brought in to give a talk like this. We can customize it. But any of these groups should all be learning along with us. So for today, look around, notice what you can reasonably get reduced exposures to, see what's radiating, go scream into a pillow if you need to. That's what I used to tell my kids when they're upset, and then just come back and little by little, how can we solve a problem? Start with baby steps. You definitely want to create a sleep sanctuary, because if we don't get good sleep, we're screwing with our body's ability to heal itself. Then start getting the Ethernet cables and adapters, and one by one, plug in your devices, put things in airplane mode when you absolutely don't have to be radiating, and measure. And then look at these great sheets that the Environmental Health Trust has. They've got a ton of them. These are just 3. So use the resources. Thank you for joining us tonight. You can find Deb and Lori and Jen through Facebook at this link. You can also email them directly here. You can get to me through my research repository, where we've got a lot of interesting information. And then you can email me directly here too. So we hope that you will give us your questions now. I know Deb has been great at monitoring anything that might have gone into the chat. And we can now get your take on this. What do you guys think about what you've learned tonight? Do you have questions? What do you think your next steps are going to be? Do you have successes from where you are that you'd like to share with others? We can open it up for comment now if you like.
There is a question in the chat, Cece, from Nicole.
Okay.
She can either ask it herself or I can read it from the chat.
Sure, why don't you go ahead and read it, and then if she
Okay.
has anything to add.
Nicole's question is, do personal protective pendants work like the Harmony pendant?
That is a really excellent question, and we hear that all the time. You and I are very different biologically. Everybody is. So some product that might help to strengthen your biosphere might well short out the next person. So we never recommend a particular product for anybody. I had the privilege of working with a doula one time. She is a midwife and a doula, and she practices energy healing. And what she does is she does energy testing. So she muscle tests with people while they're holding a particular product to see if they can hold their energy or if it shorts them out and their body goes limp. So muscle testing is a good way to test any kind of a product. If you go out to Jeremy Johnson's website, he is emfanalysis.com, and he has a page on recommendations, and there are certain products that he does recommend to help you shield or to help you, reduce your exposures. But he's got a little paragraph. He's electromagnetically sensitive himself, and he's tried a lot of this stuff. And he basically says the first line of defense, you have to remove the exposures and then tread very carefully with products. Okay. Next question, comment?
There's another question here from Jessica. I read an article a while back in New Hampshire that 5G should not be near fire stations, airports, etc. Is this still under consideration?
That is fact on both of them, and we've got excellent resources. If you go out to Massachusetts for Safe Technology and you go to the resources page, that'll link you into My Understanding EMFs, and just type in IAFF, which is the International Association of Firefighters. And here's what happened. Way back as far as 2004, there were firefighters in Santa Barbara, California, who went to go get on their engine and went to go get suited up, and they couldn't remember what they were supposed to be doing. They got on their engine ultimately, and they couldn't remember where they were supposed to be going in a community that they have serviced for decades. They got to the emergency and they couldn't remember how to administer emergency protocols. And there was a cell tower that was mounted right at the front of their station, and there was a 12-lane highway behind their station. And so these cell towers were sending wicked signals through the fire station to get to the highway. And Dr. Gunnar Hauser and Susan Foster, who's a medical journalist, got wind of this, and they started investigating. Dr. Gunnar Hauser, who's actually a speaker at the EMF Medical Conference, God love him, he is in his 90s and he is still doing this work. But he did functional MRIs and scanned the brains of these firefighters, and it had changed the gray matter of their brain. And these guys lived, worked, and slept in the firehouse for extended periods. So the IAFF put out a position statement that they do not approve of fire equipment, cell towers on their stations. They still need to have emergency services, and we know how to do that safely. But we don't need cell towers, but there's big money in it. And my understanding is that the higher ups in the IAFF today are still taking money from industry at the expense of the health of the rank and file down on the ground. But that IAFF statement is still up on their website. If you do IAFF cell towers, you'll get that at a direct search. So that's a really good thing to print out and take down to your fire stations. And if you go out to the events page at Massachusetts for Safe Technology and you scroll past our seminars like tonight, the next thing down there is the EMF Medical Conference. And we have a letter you can click on to print out to take to your healthcare practitioners to say, please, this is a whole new area of medicine that I think you need to know. Take the medical conference, but also take that letter to your firefighters and your police officers and your police chief and say, we need to have our public servants trained on this as well. And the firefighters have told me that they really like that EMF medical conference because they don't have budget to travel to a medical conference. And now they can take this online at their own time in between medical emergencies at the fire station. So go ahead and take advantage. As for the pilots, yes, and we have a really excellent resource for you on that too. If you go to the news page at Massachusetts for Safe Technology, we have a colleague by the name of Nina Anderson, and Nina is a retired corporate pilot. And let that sink in for a second. How cool is that? That she broke into a man's world of airline pilots so long ago that now she's retired and in her 70s. But when the FCC and the telecom industry and the FTA and everybody was talking about the risks of the 5G small cell antennas potentially interfering with the altimeters on the plane, which are the instrumentations that allow a plane to land properly, Nina wrote this article that was placed by a journalist in Professional Pilot magazine. And that article is available on my website at Massachusetts for Safe Technology on the events page. And it tells our pilots that it's not just the altimeters that's getting dysregulated, it's our pilots. It's a cognitive impairing neurotoxin. And it's really well resourced. So I flew out to Minneapolis for a conference recently, and I knew I was going to be on 2 different planes. And so I printed out 2 copies of Nina's article and I handed it to the pilots on both of my planes. And oftentimes the flight crew is standing around waiting for the last crew to clean up and deplane and clear the plane. So they're just hanging out. So I walked up with the Massachusetts for Safe Technology information card. And anybody's welcome to print this out. And our friends at New Hampshire for Safe Technology created one of their own too, and they can make it available for you to just send it to your local printer and have a stack, because then you've got something credible to talk to people about. So I walk up to the flight crew with this and I ask them if they know where the antenna is on the plane for Wi-Fi, because I don't want to sit anywhere under it. Usually it's right mounted on the top of the plane, or it's up near first class because they want the best of everything, right? So that's my opener, is I ask if they know where the antenna is mounted on the plane. And they mostly don't know, but now I've piqued their curiosity and I said, hey, do one of you have an iPhone? I'll show you something that'll help you understand why I'm asking this. And then I just show them the legal fine print. And because I have a meter that I travel with, I show them how much radiation is coming out of their own device. And now I have their attention. So it's all about planting seeds and having these amazing resources to immediately establish credibility.
We have more questions.
Great.
Okay, from Jane, I just checked on antenna search and I have 60 towers and 180 antenna in the 3-mile radius around my house. Is this considered high? And if so, what can I do about it? And how do I protect me and my autistic 14-year-old son and my 22-year-old daughter who lives with me part-time?
Oh, what a beautiful question. So lots of good thoughts for you. One is at antennasearch.com, you can drill down and you can see exactly where those are and how far each one is from your home. And then you get to start making some decisions, because we know that within 1,640 feet, we see higher increases of neurotoxicity. We do know that autism is a neurotoxic disease, so that might factor into your decision-making. So first, see how far away they are. Second, give your town a call and say, where are we with any new applications that you might be entertaining at this time? And find out if they have applications for any new equipment coming near you. And that would include the macro antennas and cell towers, as well as the 5G small cell antennas. So find out what you have and what's coming. The next step is to look around your home and see what you're exposed to indoors. And if you go to Massachusetts for Safe Technology and you look on our events page where we list our webinars like we're doing tonight, we like to pull out some good conversations that we had during the Q&A. And if you look down a little ways, you'll see that Eric Windheim, who's one of these building biologists, he joined us one night. And I love it when the experts come on and share their stories with us, because Eric, being a building biologist, goes into homes all the time and sees the incredible difference it can make when we remediate the exposures over which we have direct control. And I can't remember which story he told that night, but he has told me about a couple of autistic families. One, there was a family whose doctor recommended that they bring in a building biologist. And in another, he goes in and he shuts everything off, all the power, which kills all the radio frequency, but it also kills all of the other electricity that's flowing through the wires in the house. And one by one, he turns things on again and tests to see if the emissions are safe or not, because it's invisible on all of the man-made stuff. So he has professional equipment and he can tell if there's dirty electricity coming through the walls. He can tell, and one example he gave was the pool pump was putting a ton of dirty electricity on the wiring of the house that was now emanating into the home. So in one of these homes, he went in and he shut everything off. And from the back bedroom, a young man who has autism came out and he said, "What just happened? The pressure in my head is gone." Right? And then in another family, I think it was a different family, Eric said that he went in and he did his investigation. He presented the family with a report. The report indicated there were measures they could take to reduce the toxic exposures. And then they hired him again to bring an electrician in, and he partners with an electrician, and one by one, they remediated all of the toxic exposures. And the mom came back some months later and said, "Eric, I can't thank you enough. My son is having the most amazing experience at school. He has advanced 2 grade levels. He's able to hold on a conversation with 3 adults at once. And he is just making cognitive gains like we never could have hoped for." So you might want to consider bringing in a building biologist because they are at the ready. Depending on where you are, we might be able to recommend some folks in the local New England area. There aren't enough of them, but there are also others who will do a Zoom consult with you. They'll ship you the equipment so that you can measure for yourself and then send the data back to them and they'll tell you what to do. So there's help right there for you. There's also medical doctors. Once they get trained, they can help a family who has an autistic family member or multiple autistic family members. So Dr. Toril Jelter is out in Walnut Creek, California, for example, and she does a digital detox with the families in her care who have autism, and she encourages them to turn everything off for 12 hours at night. And she sees incredible inroads. And in one of her videos, she talks about a boy who I think was maybe, I want to say like 9 or 10. And they did the digital detox. And not long after, maybe a week or 2 into it, the son, who had been nonverbal, reached over to his mom and said, "Mom, can you hand me the scissors or something?" And they both went, because nobody, the child nor the mother, had ever heard this child speak before. And he had his whole vocabulary in there, but he never was able to get it out until his body was biologically able to heal. And Peter Sullivan, who I spoke of, who joined us at the National Institutes of Health, he now has a website called Clear Light Ventures. And if you go to Peter's website, he gives talks through the autistic community at Autism One, I want to say. And he's got a lot of really good information there. So learn what's exposing around you, bring in a professional if you can, and one by one start remediating. And then if you do have a cell tower right on top of you that you can't remediate, you need to think about moving or shielding. But maybe you'll be lucky and it's perhaps not too close to you, in which case you can just figure out what's going on inside your home and do your best to remediate that.
Cece, I wanted to add to that too. It's critically important to measure, because if you shut off everything in your home and then you turn them on and you measure in your home what is radiating,
Yeah.
that could be far worse, and most likely is far worse. But if you turn everything off so nothing's radiating, you can tell whether the cell towers around you or antenna are affecting you, or whether it's coming from inside your home. And inside your home is definitely the place to start.
Yeah, if you can afford it, I'm right on board with Deb there. Get a meter because it's invisible. I'll give you an example in my house too, as Deb said. So aside from that smart stove we got, I was sitting here one day and, I had to heal myself from leaky gut syndrome. I was diagnosed with that right around the same time I figured out wireless, nearly a decade ago. So it's been a fun ride here. So I now eat a very clean organic diet. I try and stay low usage with alcohol and sugar and stuff. So if I do all that, I feel really good all of the time because I get good sleep. But one day I was sitting here in my office and it just felt like the earth was sucking me down again. And I'm like, what is going on? So I turned on my meter and I start scanning, and it was my printer. And there's a little icon on the front that glows when the Wi-Fi is active, and it wasn't lit, but it's like sending my meter off the charts, and I'm like, what the heck? So I go online and I pull up the manual for this model, and guess what? I had 3 antennas in that one printer over there. And my daughter had been home and needed to print something and said, Mom, can I just turn on the Wi-Fi real quick? So I said, sure, just turn it right off. And she thought she did, but there were 2 other antennas buried in there for, I don't know, Bluetooth or some other crazy thing. All I had to do was go into the settings, find those antennas and go off, and then let it dissipate and then measure. So people talk about shielding too as a way to protect themselves indoors, but I would never do that without a professional. And I'll give you an example of a woman here in Massachusetts in the town next to me. Her health crashed just like Deb's. Didn't know what was going on. She's a healthcare practitioner too. She wound up couch surfing because every time she tried to go into her own condo that she owned, she was getting incredibly sick. So Patricia Burke, who's another one of these angels here on earth and the first person I connected with over this, Patricia, I think, was one of the ones who taught her about EMFs. And so this woman decided, she learned there was shielding paint, and she decided that she would just paint that whole wall in her condo, where outside there were 7 smart meters mounted for their electric services. So she thought she did a great job. She painted that whole wall with the carbon black paint and then put a pretty color over it and thought she'd be good. But what she didn't know enough to know is that on the other side of her condo was a neighbor who had wireless everything. And we know these signals go through walls, floors, ceilings. So all their radiation was coming into her space, beaming in and whacking that wall and coming back and double whammying her. So if you're going to do any kind of shielding, do work with a professional. But if you do create a sanctuary, you need to be vigilant about not letting radiation into your space. And so this meter, this Safe and Sound Pro 2 has, and I just learned this recently when I was helping Dr. Havas with her study, it's got a plug in it where you can plug in, actually, ironically, it's my cell phone charger. This particular port here, I just happen to have the charger that is the same, but I can plug this in and you can just leave it running in your home without using the battery. And if somebody walks in and is about to radiate you and it's going to make you sick, then you can say, oh, wait a sec, step back outside. You must have something on you that's radiating. And we don't do that in my house. So there's solutions at every turn. So did I answer that question?
I think so.
Okay.
We have another question. Are the chemtrails in the sky, do they have anything to do with 5G, or is that conspiracy theory?
That's an excellent question. So if you go into my research repository through Massachusetts for Safe Technology, and you look at the bills in other states, if you go under Rhode Island, they are the first, I think, to have introduced a bill a couple sessions ago on these chemtrails and weather changing systems. And what we see in the documentation that's accompanied that Rhode Island segment is that, yes, radio frequency radiation is part and parcel to those chemtrails.
Mhm.
So you can go look at the facts at that. There's a woman in Rhode Island who's worked really hard on that, and we can put you in touch with her if you want additional information. But radio frequency is part of that system, so it's not a conspiracy.
What? No more questions?
Okay. Well, we've done great. We went right up to 8 o'clock. I have to go watch Dancing with the Stars now. That's my guilty pleasure and where I escape to. All right, everybody. Thank you so much. We know it's a lot of information, but New Hampshire for Safe Technology will provide you with a video. When you get the YouTube video, if you click into the description, you'll find a link to my slides from tonight. And then you can drill down and know for yourself what the facts are. And now you've got a great packet to take right to anybody who you think would want to learn. Be gentle with yourself. Be gentle with others. Be the kind of person that you would want to work with. Because inside me, as calm as I might look today, there's a crazy lady in here jumping down going, we're frying our frickin' kids and our planet. But if you lead with her, guess what? It ignites the amygdala. That's our old brain. And that part of the brain goes, fight, flight, or freeze. And nobody can absorb information when the amygdala is ignited. So be patient, especially with your adult children, because they're adults now and they have to make their choices. So lead by example. I know Deb and I can tell you that our kids thought we were freaking whack jobs when we fell down the rabbit hole. But one by one, they've come back and said, hey, Mom, can I borrow your meter for my new home? Can I borrow my meter while I go get my new car? And then they start having babies and they want a perfectly safe home. So it's frustrating. It's hard work, but we have so many resources right at your fingertips. So let us know how we can help. I'm going to watch Dancing with the Stars. Thank you so much, Deb.
Thank you, Cece. Thank you for everyone for joining us.
And let us know how we can help everyone. Have a good night.
Good night.